snacks in hand. The vibe is set. And once I start, don't eat too much because you gotta stay fine. But come on, bestie, it's... Hey, bestie boo, I missed you. You want to go get your snack? Yeah? You want to go get your balloon? Okay. Before we start, I want to actually, like, from the bottom of my heart, say thank you. I feel like I'm always coming on here thanking you guys for something. Anyway, you guys bullied me into making an Amazon list for my apartment. I definitely said no at first, but y'all was like, yes. And I think that's so sweet, and I'm learning how to accept love at this stage of my life. And so, yeah, I made the list, but it's only, like, cheap stuff in there. The link is in my bio, so if you would like to give... Oh, that sounds so weird. Oh my god. Anyway, let's get on to the story. For the sake of this story, let's call this girl Lisa. And Lisa is a proud side bitch. Ugh. Lisa took pride in fucking people's niggas until she fucked the right nigga. Well, I guess you could say the wrong nigga. Anyway, she met this man. He is fine. She saw him. She said, I need that. And so she went. She tried to make a move on him. And he respectfully told her, like, hey, thanks, appreciated, flattered, but I have a girl. And she was on some shit like, I don't give a fuck about that. Like, what that got to do with me? So he's like, bro, if you knew my girl, you wouldn't even be talking to me right now. You know, these side bitches be feeling like they, This is close because I've dealt with that shit before, and it's actually so sad how these bitches are willing. Stop recording. That was my cue to stop talking. Anyway, he tells her, bro, if you knew my girl, you wouldn't even be talking like this. She don't give a fuck. She's like, can I get your number? Like, can I get your Instagram? Like, something. We can't be friends. He tells her once again, thank you, but I'm good. And he walks away. But she really wanted him. And so she ended up finding his Instagram from one of his friends because they had, like, you know, mutual friends. Now, the guy, let's call him Martin. Now, Martin is so well trained by his girl that immediately he calls her like, hey, babe, there's this girl trying to get... And I told her I have a girl, but she not trying to hear that, bro. And she just started following me on Instagram. I just want to tell you, in case you see I get a new follower, you won't think I tried to bag a bitch. And it's crazy because his girl wasn't even the insecure type either. Like, she not, like, she don't be on him. Like, she... At the end of the day, you do what you want to do. So she don't do all that extra going through his phone, his emails, she don't do that. But her friends do. And that's why he made sure to call her, because one of those friends was gonna know this. Anyway, the girl's like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess cool. Like, you rejected her, right? And he said, yeah. And she was just like, yeah, well, as long as you rejected her, I don't really give a fuck. Like, she can't do nothing unless you agree. Period, queen. But she didn't know how dedicated Lisa was to getting this man. Get this. And it's not because... I mean, it's because he's fine and all of that. But it's because when she went to his girl's profile, she is a badass bitch. And one thing I noticed, these side bitches, once they find out you a badass bitch, they become fucking obsessed. And the obsession kind of redirects towards the nigga when it's really about you. If only y'all knew. This story hits. Anyway, badass bitch, got motion, got money. And so do he. He got motion, he got money. They got motion together. They one of them, like, you feel me, power couples. And so she like, yeah, I need that. I need a piece of that. Bitches be desperate, man. Anyway, she starts, like, DMing him and stuff like that. And eventually, she ends up finding his number. Start texting. Mind you, he's not texting back. He wasn't texting back on IG. He was actually about to block her, but his girl told him not to. Because she want to see how far this bitch is really going to go. And far she went, because guess what? One of his friends is having a birthday party. And guess who shows up to the birthday party? Now, the mutual friend that they had is not that friend. She does not know that friend. She just showed up to the party because she knew that he was going to be there. So she gets there. She sees him, of course. She says hi, you know. He's trying to keep it as, like, closed off as possible, but she's like a fucking puppy following him all fucking night. They all do that shit. To the point where he went up to his friend like, yo, why is she here? If you knew about, like, you know I got a girl, like, why did you invite her here? And so the friend is like, I didn't invite her here. I barely know this girl. That's so-and-so friend. So-and-so not even here. Do you want me to ask her to leave? Because I will. And so he's like, yeah, can you ask her to leave? So as they're having this conversation, she comes up to both of them with a plate in her hand, and she gives it to him. She gives it to Martin like, hey, I made you a plate from the food over there. I thought I saw you were busy with your friend and stuff like that. You probably didn't have time to make you a plate, so I made you one. So at that moment, the friend stepped in and said, hey, actually, can I talk to you on the side for a second? And so he takes the plate, gives it to Martin take her to the side to ask her to leave. He made up something about how there wasn't enough seeds or something. And she didn't actually like fight back or anything like that. She was just like, oh yeah, I understand. Like, I'll leave. That's fine. And she came to Martin to say goodbye, gave him the longest, most awkward hug. And then she left. But before she left, she told him, make sure you eat your food. And for some reason, that was more of a reason why he didn't want to eat that food. He was like, nah, I'm not eating that. And a weird thought crossed his mind. And really, it's his girl's thought, because he's around his girl so much. He wasn't a very spiritual person before he met her, but ever since he met her, she's like a very godly, spiritual person. And so he had the thought, let me not throw the food away, let me bring it home with me. I'm not going to eat it, but something's telling me to bring it home. And so he packs the food. When it's time to go, he goes home to his girl, and he tells the girl, he tells his girl what happened at said party. And so the girl is like, you just brought the food? He's like, yeah, I don't know, something was telling me to bring the food. I didn't eat it or nothing like that. Like, I didn't take one bite. And so she was like, if something told you to bring the food, there must be a reason. Where's the food? And he goes, oh shoot, actually I forgot it in the car. And so she says, okay. She goes to the car. She gets the food. She opens it, and there is maggots all over it. And so she calls him outside, and he comes outside. He's like, what the fuck? This food is only a few hours old. There's no way there should be maggots all over it. Who the fuck cooked this food for these people? Let me call my mans and tell these people don't eat that food. His girl's looking at him like, dummy. She's like, you don't have to call anybody, because that food was meant for you. That bitch put voodoo in that food, and that food was supposed to be for you. And then she goes, actually, go ahead, call your friend and ask him to check on the food. And I promise you, he'll tell you everybody else's food is perfectly fine. And yeah, he called him, and yes, everybody's food was perfectly fine. But at this point, the girl is like, I see what you're going for. Like, I knew I was dealing with a low self-esteem, desperate bitch. But damn, I didn't know she was going to go that far. Now that I know how far she's willing to go, yeah. Guess what she did? She fasted for 1 day. And guess who got jumped and arrested a week later? Yeah. And guess for why? Take a guess. Yeah. Somebody in the past whose man she fucked, caught her lacking, jumped her with her friends at a party. She was drunk as hell after getting beat up, drove home, got pulled over. She now has a DUI. And that's not even the only part of her troubles. But they don't really know her like that. They just know the surface level stuff. But clearly, like, after about a month, she was going through it. But yeah, that's the story, y'all. Don't forget to get your book so you can protect yourself from bitches like that. Because trust, I definitely did my own fasting against a bitch like that. And guess who's winning and who's not? I really be wishing I could tell y'all to see, but I can't. Anyway, the Amazon list is in my bio, and I love you. Bye.
The ghost at my grandma's house drags something behind them. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now let me focus. Scary story time, Fright Night Files. I want to tell you about my grandmother's house because I think about it more than I should for a 28-year-old person who is otherwise completely functional. I also cannot sleep with my bedroom door open because of what used to happen in the hallway of my grandmother's house when I was 8 years old. My grandmother was not a spooky woman. I want to be clear about that because I think people assume that haunted houses come with haunted owners. She made biscuits from scratch every single morning. Pause. My grandmother used to do that too. So she watched Wheel of Fortune every night. She kept hard candy in a glass dish on the coffee table and fresh flowers on the kitchen table, and everything about her and her house was warm and ordinary and safe, except the hallway. The house was a small, single-story ranch-style home, the kind built in the late 1950s that you still see all over the South. 3 bedrooms off a central hallway, 1 bathroom at the end. When I would sleep over, I stayed in the middle bedroom, the one that had been my mother's growing up. It had yellow curtains and a double bed with a quilt my grandmother had made herself, and a nightlight shaped like a seashell that cast everything in a pale pink glow. The hallway outside that room was maybe 30 feet long. Hardwood floors, no rug, and at night, when the house was quiet and dark, it was the loudest 30 feet of silence I have ever experienced in my life. The first time it happened, I was 8 years old. I'd been asleep for a few hours when I woke up for no reason I could identify. No sound, no nightmare, just suddenly completely awake. The nightlight was on, the yellow curtains were still, everything was exactly as it should have been. And then I heard it. A dragging sound, coming from the far end of the hallway, from the direction of my grandmother's room, moving slowly towards me. heavy and deliberate and rhythmic. Something being pulled across hardwood floors, something metal from the sound of it, a low scraping ring that I felt in my back teeth as much as I heard it with my ears, dragging, and then a footstep, dragging, and then a footstep, getting closer. I want to describe to you what 8-year-old fear feels like, because I think adults forget. It is total. It is physical. It starts in your stomach and moves outward until your whole body is involved, and the only thing your brain is capable of producing is a single repeating instruction, which in my case was, do not move, do not make a sound, do not exist any more than you absolutely have to. I pulled the quilt up to my chin and I lay completely flat, and I stared at the bedroom door, which I had left open a few inches because I always left it open a few inches because I was 8 and I didn't like the dark. The dragging got closer and closer, and then it stopped directly outside my door. I could see the gap at the bottom of the door in the pink nightlight glow, and in that gap, a shadow. 2 feet, standing still, just standing there on the other side of the door I had left open 3 inches because I was a kid who didn't know yet that some doors should stay closed. I don't know how long it stood there. Time does not work correctly when you're 8 years old and terrified. It could have just been 30 seconds. It could have been 5 minutes. It stood there in complete silence, and I lay in that bed in complete silence, and we existed on opposite sides of that door together until finally, slowly, the shadow moved away and the dragging started again, going back in the direction it had come from, and then faded and then stopped entirely. I did not sleep again that night. I watched that door until the sun came up. In the morning, my grandmother made biscuits and we watched the Today Show, and I didn't say a word about it, and some part of me already understood that saying it out loud would make it more real than I was prepared for it to be. But I went home and I told my mother. She went very quiet, and then she said, carefully, the way adults speak when they're deciding how to tell a child, she said that when she was growing up in that house, she used to hear it too. I asked her what she thought it was. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said that her grandmother, my great-grandmother, who had died in that house before I was born, had kept an axe by her bedroom door. This was not unusual for a woman living alone in a rural area in the 1940s and 1950s. It was practical. It was protection. She said her grandmother used to drag it into the hallway at night. This is so scary. Okay, wait. Let me collect myself, because what? Okay, she would drag it into the hallway at night to check on things. That's how she described it. Checking on things, walking the hallway with the axe, dragging behind her at night to make sure everything was as it should be. My great-grandmother had been dead for 11 years by the time I'd heard that sound. I stopped sleeping over at my grandmother's house after that conversation. Not immediately. I was a child and I didn't have control over where I went, but I stopped being able to. I would find reasons. I would fake illness. I would do whatever was necessary because I knew that if I lay in that bed and heard that dragging sound again and looked at that door and saw the shadow, I would not be able to pretend anymore that it was pipes or the house settling or anything that had a name that I could look up. The last time I stayed there, I was 11. I lay in that bed with the yellow curtains and the seashell nightlight, and I stared at the ceiling, and around 2 in the morning, I heard it start at the far end of the hallway. The scrape of metal on the hardwood, the footstep, the scrape, getting closer. I got up, I crossed the room, and I pushed the bedroom door fully closed, and I stood with my back against it until morning. Whatever was in that hallway stood outside my door for a long time that night. I could feel it there the way you can feel someone standing behind you in a room even when you can't see them. I never went back after that. My grandmother passed away 6 years ago and the house was sold. I drove past it once about a year after the sale. A young family had moved in. There were bikes in the driveway and a basketball hoop and potted plants on the porch. I thought about the hallway. I thought about the new family sleeping in those 3 rooms off the 30-foot stretch of hardwood floor. I hope they're heavy sleepers. I hope they keep their doors closed, and I genuinely hope that whoever is walking that hallway at 2 in the morning decided that her job was done when the house changed hands. God, that is terrifying. Grandma ghosts freak me out anyway, and the thought of one like making her way down a hallway dragging an axe behind her, I'm good. No, thank you. Like, what would you guys do? What would you do? And who tells an 8-year-old, oh, it's your dead great grandma with an axe? Like, what?
Imagine you had an Alexa and you would talk to it almost like if it was your best friend and ask it anything that you would want. If you have an Alexa, you might want to turn her off at least until the story is over, unless you don't want to turn her back on at all. Thank God I don't have an Alexa. No joke, I've heard so many scary stories that have to do with Alexa, and this is just another one. So this girl says that her best friend gifted her an Alexa, and at first she didn't find like a use for it. She didn't think she was gonna reach for it or talk to it at all. But then there was a day that she was looking for a recipe and she decided, well, let me give it a shot. So she asks Alexa for the recipe, she gives it to her in full detail, and she was surprised. She was in love with this Alexa now because she knew that she would give her all the details, all the ingredients, step by step, like she knew what to do. So now she was really excited about this Alexa, and she would start talking to it non-stop all day, every day. She would say, good morning, Alexa, good afternoon, Alexa, good night, Alexa, and she would ask her random questions. Alexa, what's the recipe for this? Alexa, can you set an alarm? Alexa, what time is it? You know, she was really getting into using this Alexa. She realized that she was missing out on not having this Alexa in her life, and she started to use it more and more frequently and really loved it. But this is also when she started to ask Alexa more personal questions. So randomly one day she decided to say, hey Alexa, how do I look today? And Alexa would respond and tell her that she's looking really pretty. So the following day she had an appointment to get her hair done. She changed the color, she got a trim, and when she went home, she says, hey Alexa, how does my hair look today? Alexa would respond and say, oh, I love that tone on your hair. And that's when she was like, well, what tone is my hair? And Alexa would tell her the exact color that she had changed it to. So that is what she meant when things started to get personal, when she would ask more personal questions. For example, there was a day that she got home and she ends up telling Alexa, hey, I really had a bad day today. And Alexa would respond with, I know that meeting you had at work must have been really hard and draining. You know, Alexa was responding in a way almost like if she had gone to work with her, but she didn't get scared. She really didn't think anything of it. She just thought that these machines would get really personal, almost as if they would adapt to the person that they're conversing with day after day. So there was a day where she was gonna go meet up with her friends for lunch, and the girl who had gifted her the Alexa was there as well, and she tells her, oh my god, I'm so in love with this Alexa, like I didn't know what I was missing in my life. And her friend was like, oh, I'm so glad that you like the Alexa. And she tells her, well, I like it more because I like that I can ask her anything and she'll give me an answer. And her friend was like, well, yeah, that's what Alexa is there for. And she goes, no, I like that I can talk to her about my day-to-day things. I can ask her questions and she'll give me an answer. How does my hair look? How does my outfit look? And she always gives me her honest opinion. She fully expected her friend to be like, wow, you know, Alexa did this, but her friend's face totally changed. She looked worried and she's like, wait, why did your face just change? Why are you looking at me like that? That's when her friend tells her, well, because that's not normal. So she's like, what do you mean that's not normal? I ask her questions and she gives me the answer. So her friend tells her, like, that's not even an answer that Alexa can give you. Like, it's not even in the program. How can she even see what your hair looks like or what your clothes looks like? So she tells her, I promise you, like, she gives me answers and it's the exact thing that I'm wearing, my hair color and everything. I'm not lying. If you don't believe me, we can go to my house and I can show you that she answers. So because her friend was actually really scared and worried about what she was hearing, she's like, okay, let's go to your house and show me that Alexa describes these things. Before they get to her house, her friend tells her, hey, it's impossible for Alexa to know what you look like because there's no camera. So yeah, this is concerning and I don't know how you are not concerned about this. Like, how is it possible that she's telling you these things? And she tells her, I don't know, I just know that that's the conversations that I've been having with the Alexa you gave me. So they finally make it to her house and she's like, okay, I'm going to show you that she describes everything that I'm wearing. So they go to where the Alexa is and she says, hey Alexa, how do I look today? Alexa then says, I cannot answer that question. She stays there all shocked, and that's when her friend was like, I told you she can't answer those questions. She's looking at her friend like, no, I promise you. Alexa would respond like, watch. Alexa, what did I do yesterday? Alexa again responds, I cannot answer that question. By this point, she is asking Alexa question after question after question, and Alexa was giving no response, like, I cannot answer this question type shit. By this point, her friend was like, oof, I'm relieved. She stayed there in shock. She was like, what the fuck? Because she thought that her friend maybe thought she was lying, and she knows that she wasn't lying, so it was actually making her look crazy in front of her friend. By this point, her friend, seeing that the Alexa was not saying all these things that she had told her, decided that she was gonna go. She was like, okay, I'm gonna go home, enjoy your Alexa, like, Let me get out of here. Her friend honestly thought that it was a joke, that her friend was trying to prank her and scare her. So she was like, let me get the fuck out of here because I almost fell for your prank. I was this close to falling for your fucking joke. And the girl was like, no, for real. Like, I'm not joking. She gave me the answers. I'm serious. I'm not trying to play with you. Her friend was like, okay, whatever. Don't worry about it. I'm going home. And her friend ends up leaving. So now she is home alone with this Alexa and she's standing there like, what the fuck is happening? Because I didn't make this shit up. Like, I know that Alexa was giving me these answers. She ends up turning to her Alexa and she's like, fuck it. Like, what do I got to lose now? So she's like, Alexa, why are you acting this way? And Alexa, reads her question and responds, because that's what I was programmed to do. Alexa would be swimming with the fishes because what the fuck? Unfortunately, we do not know what happened after that because this is a story that was sent into this podcast called Tercera Frecuencia Podcast. I'm gonna leave it in the caption if you guys want to go listen to it in Spanish. But like, what the fuck? I would get rid of that, Alexa. Actually, I would give it back to my friend. Like, go install it in your house and see what the fuck. Oh my god. I'm so petty. Would I do that? Would you do that? What would you guys do? Yeah. What the fuck?
One of my followers might have summoned a demonic entity. I had always been fascinated by the supernatural and paranormal as a child, and that interest followed me into adulthood. I think it started around the 2nd grade. I became friends with 2 girls, both a year younger than me. We went to this countryside school that used to be a manor, big building, creepy empty rooms. The school felt like more of a community than just a place where strangers were crammed together. Everyone knew everyone. Because we had daycare after classes up until 4th grade, we'd usually go to a nearby park if the weather was nice. It was close to the bus pickup spot, so we could be outside without worrying about missing it. The park sat right at the edge of the woods, and the whole school was basically surrounded by forest. Me and these 2 girls would go to this specific spot with 3 logs that acted like benches, right at the edge of the park. We'd sit there and tell creepy stories, the kind that made us uneasy. That was our thing. Then came the internet. I started deep diving into ghost stories, legends, everything. At that age, I believed all of it. But what really caught my attention were rituals, specifically summoning rituals. The next time I saw the girls, I asked if they wanted to try one, and they were just as excited as I was. We didn't follow any instructions or guides, we just made it up as we went. That same day after school, during daycare, we went to our usual spot by the woods. The teacher trusted us and knew we stayed out of the forest, so she didn't mind us being a bit away from the group. We sat in a circle on the ground and started doing random hand movements. I don't remember exactly what we did, but later on, I realized it was kind of like energy work, like we were trying to pull energy from the ground, from nature. We never even discussed what it was that we were summoning, but suddenly, this image came into my mind, a man with the face of a pig. So we went with it, and we called out to it. When we finished, we were on edge, but nothing happened. We checked the woods from a distance, didn't go in, saw nothing, and eventually moved on. The next day, we did it again, and again, nothing happened. But that didn't stop us. We kept doing it, every day. It became a routine. Somewhere along the way, we started convincing each other that this thing was real. We'd scare each other, exaggerate, even lie a little. Just typical kid stuff. Then one day, everything changed. It was around fall, October or early November. It was getting darker earlier now. We had just finished the ritual, and the bus time was coming up soon. We were sitting there, like usual, telling stories, when we heard a branch snap behind us in the woods. We all slowly turned around. We didn't say anything, but we were thinking the same thing. We had done this before, checking the woods without going in. So we spread out like we usually did, one on the left, one in the middle, one on the right, just to cover more ground. I was on the far left. That's when I felt it. My palms started sweating. My heartbeat was in my throat. I felt this tingling in the back of my head, and then the woods went completely silent. Another branch snapped. It echoed. The only other sound was distant chatter from the other kids. I froze, because I saw something moving. It was crawling on all fours. At first it looked like a man, which honestly scared me even more. A naked man in the middle of the woods, crawling on all fours. I signaled the girls over, putting my finger to my lips to tell them to stay quiet. They came over and we all looked. The man looked like he was digging, or at least trying to, with his hands, scratching at the ground. I heard one of my friends gulp, loud enough that it made me do the same. One of them whispered that she was going to call the teacher, and honestly, that's what we should have done. But then he turned around, and I swear to you, I'm not exaggerating. The man had the face of a pig, same ears, bloody. The image is still stuck in my head. He just stared at us. I remember his snout moving, like he was sniffing the air, and that's when everything broke. One of my friends screamed, and we all ran back to the teacher. We told her everything. But of course, 3 kids who loved scary stories, claiming that they saw a naked, pig-faced man in the woods. She didn't believe us. Later on the bus, we talked about it. All of us saw the same thing. The same bloody ears, the same snout, the same digging. We didn't go back to that spot for 3 weeks. We stayed close to the other kids. We still told ghost stories, but we never did that ritual again. When we eventually went back, we still heard things in the woods sometimes. Branches snapping, movement, but we either ignored it or made excuses to leave. We never talked about it the same way again.
Guys, Hawaii has finally entered the chat, and I'm probably saying that wrong, so I'm so sorry. But tonight's story is definitely a good one, so let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. So there was this man, right, that worked at a funeral home where they did cremations and they prepared the bodies of loved ones who had passed away. Anyway, one night he was by himself, working solo, and he had this man's body that he needed to put into the crematorium oven. Let me just mention, it was really late. Again, only him working there. So he sets the timer to the oven, puts the man's body, pushes it into this big oven, closes the door, walks off to do paperwork. As soon as he reaches his desk, the buzzer goes off, and he's thinking, that is so weird. I just put the body in there. So he thought, he mustn't have done it wrong. He goes and walks back, and sure enough, the door to the oven is open, and no heat, no nothing, and the body is still just sitting there. He does it again. He thinks, okay, this time let me just make sure that I'm closing the door properly and I'm doing everything right. So closes the door, sets the timer again, and presses a button to start the oven. He gets back to his desk, and sure enough, he hears the buzzer go off. Now he's thinking, nah, something is definitely not right. This time when he goes back, however, the body has actually been pulled out of the oven. So it's no longer inside, it's been pulled out. He is really confused. He doesn't know what's going on, but he's going to try one last time. So again, pushes the body back into the oven, sets the timer, closes the door, and starts it. But he thinks, nah, let me just stand here and just make sure it's working. So he stands there for maybe about a good 15 minutes, and he can see the heat, everything's starting to go fine. He thinks, okay, maybe it was me. He walks back to his desk, and no word of a lie, as soon as he gets there, he hears the buzzer go off. He is just completely dumbfounded at this point. Guys, when I tell you he walked back, tell me why this man's body was now on top of the big bench. It wasn't even pulled out. It was on top of the bench. And I'm just imagining if that was me and I had seen that, I would imagine a human body would be very heavy to lift, especially a dead weight body. So now it's sitting on this bench. He has just had it. He's terrified now. He's just nah, I'm just going to leave it here. I'm going home. This is too much. He locks the door. He gets in his car. Now, back then when this story happened, it was in the 90s, right? So from where he had to travel to home to where he worked, it was far. And he had to go through a lot of windy roads, had to go through a lot of the mountains, and there were cliffside drops. No lights, by the way. This is old school. So as he's driving, he can start to smell this burning smell. He looks in the rearview mirror, and he could have sworn that he saw that man sitting in the back seat. The same man that he was trying to cremate in the oven. He nearly swerves off the cliff. So fast forward to when the story was told. They later found out that this man actually didn't want to be cremated. That wasn't his wishes. He wanted to be buried with his loved ones. So, what a terrifying way to send the message, but oh my goodness, I'm trying to think, and I want you to think too, what would you have done if you were in that situation? That's why I give it up to anyone that works in a funeral home. If any of my followers work in a funeral home or know someone that works in a funeral home, I so want to hear from you. So can you please get in the comments or DM me? I need to hear your experiences. But that is tonight's story.
What would you do if you broke into an abandoned psych hospital in the middle of the night and heard someone screaming for help in a ward that should have been empty? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about two friends who snuck into an abandoned psych hospital at night and heard someone screaming for help behind a chain door, and it sounded human right up until it didn't. This happened when I was 19. My friend Tessa was really into abandoned places back then, and she was always finding some half-collapsed school or old farmhouse online and trying to talk people into going with her. I was a lot less brave than she was, but I still went because I didn't want to be the one who chickened out. There was an abandoned psych hospital about 40 minutes outside of town that people talked about all the time. Everybody had some story about it, and most of it sounded made up, so I didn't really care. Tessa did. She had been wanting to go for months. So one Friday night, we did. We parked off a side road and walked around a fence through weeds and mud because the front entrance was too exposed. The building was huge, bigger than I expected. It had long wings, rows of dark windows, broken glass shining under the flashlight. Even outside, I had this feeling in my stomach that we were making a mistake. Tessa was excited immediately. She kept whispering even though there was nobody around. I remember asking why she was whispering, and she just said, "Because it feels like somebody's already listening." That should have been enough for me to leave right then. We got in through a side entrance where the door had already been forced open, and inside smelled like mildew and wet plaster and maybe something old underneath that I just couldn't place. The floors were covered in debris and old papers and things that had been dragged out of rooms years ago, and some of the graffiti looked fresh, but most of it didn't. At first it was just what you'd expect. Creepy because it was abandoned and nothing more. Then we got deeper into the building. One of the hallways looked different from the rest. It was still filthy, still falling apart, but not as trashed, less graffiti, fewer broken doors. At the end of it were these heavy double doors chained shut. There was a sign beside them, half peeled off, but you could still make out enough to know it said something about the ward being closed. Across one door in black paint, somebody had written, "Do not open this." Tessa laughed when she saw that. I didn't. And the air felt so strange down that hall. Not colder exactly, just wrong. I had a horrible feeling. Like everything got muffled. Our footsteps didn't sound right. Even our breathing seemed quieter than it should have been. Tessa walked straight up to the doors and shined her flashlight through the little square wired glass window. She said, "I think there's another hall back there." And right then, we heard screaming. Not off somewhere else in the building, right behind those doors. A woman screaming so hard it sounded like her throat was tearing. It hit me so fast my legs actually went weak. Tessa grabbed my arm and I grabbed hers right back. The screaming kept going and then turned into words. "Help me." I remember that so clearly, I hate it. Then again, louder this time. "Please help me. Please open the door." Tessa said, "Oh my God, there's somebody in there." And for a few seconds, I believed that too. I really did. My brain immediately went to maybe somebody had gotten trapped back there. Maybe there were squatters. Maybe somebody was hurt. But Tessa moved closer to the glass and I followed because if there really was a person behind that door, what were we supposed to do? Just walk away? She said, "Hello?" And the screaming stopped. Not faded out, not slowed down, just abruptly stopped so completely it felt like the whole building had gone deaf. We stood there listening to nothing. Then the voice came back. It was the same voice and the same woman, but it was calmer now. Too calm. It said, "You fell for it." I felt every hair on my arm stand up at once. Tessa lifted her flashlight higher and stepped right up to the window. I said her name quietly because all at once I did not want anything behind that door to know exactly where I was standing. She leaned in and looked, and at first she said, "I can't see any," and then she cut off. Her whole body locked up. I moved to the other little window and looked through. There was a face pressed against the glass. I did not see it come forward. There was nothing there 1 second, and then it was right against the window. It was smiling. Not a person smiling in a bad situation, and not a creepy grin like somebody messing with you. Its mouth was stretched wide in a way that made the skin at the corners look too tight, like it should have been torn, but at the same time it was still making that horrible crying sound. Tears were running down its face, or something that looked like tears, and the whole face was wet. The eyes were open so wide I could see too much white around them, and they were fixed right on us, not blinking and not moving, just staring at us. Then it started saying, "Help me," again. Still smiling and still crying. I don't know if it was really a woman anymore. I don't think it was. Tessa dropped her flashlight and the beam spun across the floor and it hit the bottom of the doors. In that light, I saw something else. There were fingers curled around the gap under the door. Too many. Or maybe not too many. Maybe just bent in a way that made them look wrong. Long and pale and pressing against the floor like whatever was back there was too low to the ground. Then the thing behind the glass laughed. The smile never changed and the crying didn't stop. It just started laughing through it. That was when we ran. I didn't grab anything, not my flashlight, not Tessa's, nothing. We were slipping on trash, broken tile, and grabbing walls, just trying not to fall. I remember Tessa screaming my name once and me yelling at her to keep moving. Behind us, I could hear the chains on the doors rattling, hard. Not like someone shaking them with their hands, like something was hitting the door over and over from the inside. Then the laughing got louder. Not normal louder, like it was catching up in the hallway. I looked back once and I wish I hadn't. The doors were still shut and still chained, but through one of the little glass windows I could see the face again. And now it was pressed so hard to the glass that the skin looked flattened. One eye was crooked from the pressure, and the mouth was still open, and it was laughing now instead of crying. And one hand was up by the glass, but the fingers were way too long. We got out through the side entrance and didn't stop until we were back at the car. Tessa locked the doors and then threw up between her knees before she could even get the key in the ignition. We sat there for a while, both shaking so hard neither of us could talk right. I asked if she saw the fingers and she just started crying again. We never went back. The part that got worse later was what we found out. Tessa told her older brother because she wanted somebody to believe us. And he knew somebody who had worked maintenance there years before it closed. According to him, that ward had been sealed off long before the hospital fully even shut down. Not just locked, sealed. As in there shouldn't have been open space behind those doors anymore. Parts of it had been filled in after some structural issue. I asked Tessa what happened to the video she took. She said she watched part of it once and then deleted it. I asked what was on it. She said you could hear the screaming, you could hear the begging, you could hear the voice say, "You fell for it." And right before we started running, when her flashlight hit the bottom of the door, there was another voice under the crying, lower and closer, right by her phone. It said, "Stay. I don't go in abandoned places anymore. I don't care if people think that makes me dramatic. Some things sound human because they know that's what makes you come closer." Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
My career is blowing up and I'm getting all the fame, recognition, and money that I could have ever asked for, but I think I sold my soul in the process, and I'm here to tell you to be careful what you wish for. This spooky scary story time was submitted by someone whose career actually is blowing up, but she does get a lot of hate online, and so she requested to be anonymous, and out of respect for her privacy, I'm going to keep it that way. But she says her story started when she was 21 and she was working a dead-end job that she hated. Her job was more or less a 9 to 5, but she said she's never felt so depressed in her life. Every day she got home, she was mentally drained and exhausted. Her coworkers were toxic. She felt utterly lost and like her mental health was destroyed working this job. So ultimately she made the decision to quit and move back home for a little while she figured out what she was meant to do. But this decision actually led to her feeling even more lost because she says she essentially became a hermit. She cut off contact with all of her friends, was completely disconnected, and didn't want to do anything or spend any time with anyone. And her friends were concerned. They would reach out and she would just say, I'm fine, or she wouldn't respond at all. And eventually they stopped asking. But her sister also lived at the house. And one day she came into her room and she said, enough of this. You and I are going to go to a pool party. I got this invite. I'm going to snap you out of whatever funk you're going through. You need to get out and touch some grass, essentially, and talk to some people. So I don't know how she got this invite, but she ends up bringing her to this mansion. And she said as soon as they walked in, the place was packed wall to wall with people. Gorgeous people, but she nor her sister knew a single one of them. And eventually she sees out of the corner of her eye, there's this man standing there. And for some reason, she just felt this pull to go talk to him. So she did, and she approached him and he was friendly. And she said they ended up hitting it off. They were drinking, they were laughing, they were talking, asking her about her life, and for some reason she just feels like she can open up about what she's going through. And so she's telling him, I haven't really left the house much. And the conversation turned a little bit deeper, and he said, have you ever thought about reality TV? And so she laughs a little bit, but then she looks at him and she realizes that he's serious. And she was like, no, not really. And he's like, well, I know people. I'm really involved in the industry. I can put you in contact with certain people that can help you and help advance your career if that's something you'd be interested in. Just give me your phone number and I can make it happen. And she said she did give him her phone number. She didn't think anything was going to come of it, but she thought at the very least he was nice and they could be friends. She ends up getting called to another area of the party by her sister and actually does not talk to that man again through the rest of the party, and they leave and she doesn't really think anything of it. But a few days later, she actually gets a call and she doesn't recognize the number, but she answers. And on the other end of the line is a producer from a big American media company. And he says that they're casting for a new reality show and would she be interested? Said she was absolutely shocked, but she told him that she was interested, even though she didn't think that she had what they were looking for. But he was like, I'll handle that part. You just come, I'll get you in front of the right people, and we'll go from there. And so after a few weeks of back and forth, she did find out that she was, in fact, cast on the show. Fast forward 6 months, she goes away to film. Shortly after that, the show aired, and she said when the show aired, her life did change a little bit, but not dramatically. But a year after the show aired, she got another call from the same media company, and they said, hey, we're filming season 2. Would you like to come back and be on it? And she said, sure. After season 2 aired is when everything, including her life, exploded. The show blew up, and with it, her life. Said suddenly everything felt completely overwhelming, and she found herself on the receiving end of a ton of hate online, and in that period fell into one of the deepest depressions of her life. Said she was the most hated character. She was receiving a ton of hate that none of the other cast members were. There were articles coming out about her. People were making videos. Her family was being targeted. While all of this was happening, she says she completely shut down. She shut off her phone. She laid in bed empty for 2 weeks. She didn't eat. She didn't shower. Everything felt completely overwhelming. And one night she was laying in bed around 1 a.m. and she was unable to sleep. And she started thinking about hearing interviews or hearing people accuse famous people of selling their soul. And she said she had never believed in anything like that. But she started wondering if there was anything to it and if that's what she had accidentally done. And so she says she asked out loud for a sign, and she didn't want to go into detail as to what exactly she said because she said she didn't want to put that energy out there for anybody else. She says as she asked the question out loud, the entire room got dark. It was like every particle of light was sucked up and the shadow settled across the already dark room. She knew whatever was happening was not normal. And in the morning, she woke up to several missed calls from her boyfriend, and he seemed frantic in the text messages, like, you need to call me. So she called him back and she's like, what's going on? And he said, I had the craziest dream. He said, you and I were walking through a campsite and there was a large white tent at the end of it. And we walked in and a woman was sitting there and she told me to tell you, keep doing what you're doing and keep going. And when we walked outside the tent, there were a ton of people all around doing very appropriate and ritualistic things. She said things that you often hear about in elite circles. I'm not going to go into detail as to what she described. She just told her boyfriend that's a crazy dream, and she didn't think anything of it. She was just like, I don't know why you thought this was so important to tell me. But that night she had a dream of her own. She was in a pitch black room standing in the middle of a circle of people, and they all had entirely white eyes and red liquid dripping from their mouths. They were all wearing red robes, but she woke up in a panic and eventually forgot about the dream entirely. A week later, though, she walked up to a building that she had been frequenting for the last 4 months, and she knew that building like the back of her hand, but spray painted across the front of it was the Eye of Providence with the numbers 444 written underneath. She said, after the dreams, the energy of what I was feeling, and now this, something in me shifted. She says, since this happened, she constantly feels watched, even though she can't explain it. Her life is entirely blowing up. She said people stop her everywhere she goes. Can't keep up with the changes in her life. She is blowing up in the social media and reality television spaces. Yet even when she's alone, she feels the constant pressure of someone watching her, a heavy presence that she can't explain. Said fame gave me everything that I thought I wanted. It gave me money, it gave me power, it gave me opportunity and recognition, but it also took things from me that I didn't expect to lose, like my peace and my privacy, and worse, my sense of control. And she says her life is changing faster than she can keep up with. I don't exactly know how, but I feel like I subconsciously traded something like the person that I was for this new life, and I'll never be able to get my old one back. She says sometimes the things that you manifest come true, but they take pieces of yourself with them. She says that even though everybody wants it, fame isn't fun. It's cold and it's isolating. I feel like an animal trapped in a cage for everyone's entertainment to judge and to criticize and to watch like I'm not even a real person, but this is my life now and I can't go back. She says whether I sold my soul or not, I got what I asked for and I don't think I'll ever be free again. It feels like there's been an uptick in the number of people reporting odd, glitchy moments that they're experiencing in everyday life. And these occurrences aren't odd enough to make them feel like their entire life is altered, but they are weird enough to make them go like, wait, what just happened? And I have my own theories on what's going on. Like the CERN particle accelerator has been in the news a lot lately. And officially, this is just to understand physics. They're smashing particles together at nearly the speed of light to understand the original conditions of the universe. But unofficially, people are reporting weird things happening. I could be way, way off, okay? But I do want to share a story with you that was submitted to Spooky Scary Storytime from someone named Marshall, who says he had one of these experiences recently. Last month, he was traveling for work, and he says he travels pretty frequently, and he stays at hotels. That even though what happened was small, it was just so unsettling that he can't stop thinking about it and thinks that maybe this community can help weigh in and explain something to him. So he says that he was traveling, and he normally has this bag that he packs, and he brings on all his work trips. And in this bag is a can of this body spray that he uses all the time. Brand loyalist and says that this is the product that he always uses. And he had one can that was about half full. So he packs it and he goes on this trip. And when he checks into his hotel, he notices the hotel smells a little bit musty. So he decides he's going to take out his body spray and he's going to spray the fabrics in the room. So the curtains, the bed, and even the air conditioning vent, just to make the room smell a little bit better. And after he does this, he places the can of the body spray on the writing desk. After he does this, he returns to his suitcase to sort of unpack his clothes for the couple days that he's going to be staying in this hotel. And he taking his toiletries and his clothes out from the suitcase, and he notices there's another can of the same body spray in his suitcase, and he's like, that's weird, I don't remember buying a second one, and I just packed this bag. I only had one. But he's like, maybe it just slipped, maybe it was here from the last trip. I don't know. He's not really thinking too much of it because it's like, again, it's not that weird. He takes it out, it's a new can, it's full, and he just places it next to the original can that he brought, the half full one. He goes about his day. The next morning hits, he wakes up, he showers, and he goes over to the body sprays and he picks up the newer can to use it. He sprays himself and immediately notices that the smell is off because, again, he uses this every day. He's a brand loyalist and he knows what this product smells like. So he looks at the bottom of the can thinking maybe it's an old can that he just forgot in his suitcase from an old trip, even though he doesn't know how he missed it. And he looks at the expiration date and he realizes that the manufacturing date is actually 2 days in the future. Is also coincidentally the day he's supposed to catch his return flight home. So he puts it down. He's like, that's weird. That must have been a misprint. He picks up the other can, the half full one, and he looks at the manufacturing date. And it's from like November of last year. Sprays that can on himself and it's normal. It smells fine. So he's like, okay, this must be just like a bad batch or whatever. Puts it back on the table, doesn't think anything of it. Later, his coworker comes to his room. They're getting ready to go to a meeting or a conference or something. And his coworker even comments on the two cans. And he's like, oh, you really must like the scent. Is that why you always smell so good or whatever? And Marshall's like, oh yeah. And then he kind of just gives him a rundown. He's like, it's weird. Like they actually don't smell the same. Like smell them. He only brings this part of the story up to give credit to the fact that somebody else witnessed there being 2 cans of this body spray because there was a conversation had about it and he didn't just somehow imagine the whole thing. So Sunday night comes, it's time to pack up because he's got a return flight in the morning and he goes through his room like with a fine-tooth comb. He says he's used to business travel, so he knows how to go and make sure that he's got everything. And one of the last things that he packs is these 2 cans of body spray and he puts both of them into his suitcase next to each other on top of all his clothes. He's back home. He's not working the next day. He starts unpacking his suitcase. He opens it up. The suitcase is still locked. There's no TSA labels on it or anything to indicate that anyone has gone through his bag. Nothing is missing, except now there's only 1 can of body spray on top of his clothes. Also pointed out that his suitcase was a lock suitcase. It was not the combination kind. So if TSA had gone through his suitcase, they would have had to break the lock. It bothered him so much that this other can was missing, but nothing else in his suitcase was missing, that he actually called the hotel to see if he had left anything. We're like, no, we didn't find anything. And he was like, okay. And he said, I know that this was such a small and inconsequential event, but it's been bothering me since the day that it happened, considering I didn't plan to bring the second can. I have no idea where that second can came from. And the manufacturing date was 2 days in the future. So the day that I returned home, which is when it also went missing. So he sent this in to see if anyone can make sense of this. He's like, what do you all think happened? Because I have no explanation. And he is putting this here just for posterity because, like I said, so many people have been reporting weird and glitchy things happening lately. If you've had something that happened to you that you have no explanation for, send it in. We'd love to hear it.
Somebody submitted a spooky story saying, stay away from these celebrities because this person slept with a pop star. He is convinced that that girl was not human. This is a pretty popular up-and-coming pop singer. I'm not gonna say too much, but Damien said that he never believed in any of that supernatural stuff. So like spirits and demons, none of it. That was before he slept with this pop star. So Damien himself is an influencer. Damien met her at an after party in LA. And at the event, they just kind of made eye contact. And it seems like she locked in on Damien specifically. Like she already knew his name. They were chopping it up, things were cool. There was something really alluring about her. I mean, duh, she's a pop star. The least you would expect them to be is charismatic, but no. No, when this girl stared at him, it seemed like she was directly staring into his soul. Anyway, she invited him back to her place that same night. There was no security issues and no entourage stopped them. Now, he was pretty drunk. He says if you know anything about how these after parties in LA get, he remembers thinking that this is strange. But again, he's drunk, so he just ignores it and goes with it. If anything, he was pretty lucky. When he gets to her house wasn't normal at all. No pictures of family. This person also had no mirrors in their house. And the air itself felt heavy. Something about her felt different too. Like when she was looking at him, it didn't feel like attraction. Now they got to doing it. This might be a lot of information, but she didn't want to use protection. He admits that when they finally got into it, it was really good. But there were certain things that happened during the interaction that seemed a little off. He could have sworn like during her voice changed. Her voice sounded layered at some point. And she was adamant about taking deep eye contact during breathing together. This was very intimate for a stranger. Yes, she's a pop star, but they don't know each other. He remembers both of them having this orgasmic experience. He fell asleep. He had the weirdest dream. In his dream, it was a bunch of creatures in her house crawling to him. These creatures were dressed in red and their eyes were black. In the dream, she wasn't laying next to him. These creatures appeared to try to get something from him. It's as though he was being robbed, but he didn't have anything physical on him. Anyway, he woke up from the dream, and it's the next day, and homegirl basically tells him that it's time for him to go. She ordered him a car, he took the back exit, and he left. He said the entire ride back, he felt so drained in this level of anxiety. Well, a couple of days passed, and he's like, wow, he can't believe that happened. But one thing that he started to notice, that he had a lot of plants in his house, and they all just started to wither and die, one by one. Now, this is the part of the story where you might judge him, but his girlfriend started acting weird toward him because, yes, he had a girlfriend. They hooked up after the girlfriend got really sick. Now, this story is going on too long. So much happened in his life and everything turned upside down. Would lead him to believe that the pop star was a succubus. If you want to hear part 2, go ahead and leave a comment.
One of my followers who would like to be referred to as Mrs. A sent this story in, and honestly, the first time I read it through, it actually brought tears to my eyes. She and her family currently live in North Carolina. She says that back in 2020, she met her husband online because of everything being shut down, so they couldn't go on a proper date yet. They met up and they drove around for a while, and then he eventually took her to some land that he actually had purchased 12 years prior. So they decided to walk around the property for a while, and then on their way out, she mentioned that they came across a small pile of very smooth rocks and also a tiny pair, almost like toddler or baby-sized pair of very old shoes. So they just sort of left it alone and then didn't really think about it for a while after. Fast forward now to last week, April 2026. They had been married since 2021. They eventually built their dream home right on that property where they first walked 6 years ago together. She also says they ended up adopting a beautiful little girl who they actually used to babysit since she was 4 months old. She is now 3 years old. She says that they've walked across that same property line many times over the last 6 years, and they noticed that they never did come across those baby shoes or that pile of smooth rocks since. So on one particular day, her 14-year-old son, their 3-year-old daughter, and she were hitting golf balls into the woods. She'd like to make note that they are on 5 acres of land, and they have a minimum of 75 acres surrounding their property. And so they decided they're going to go on an adventure to find all those golf balls they've been hitting into the woods. Okay, so they get a few hundred feet into the woods, and then the 3-year-old daughter says,
I don't like it here. The people in the woods are scary. So she and her son reassure her and tell her that everything is going to be okay and not to be afraid. So they start walking back to the house, and her son is now carrying her. And then this poor little girl says to her brother, Bubba, don't drop me or they'll hear you. She says, who? And her daughter replies, them people in the woods. They'll hear you and Bubba. And she says, first of all, she doesn't even know how she would understand the concept of people, because she doesn't let her have any sort of free range on any electronic devices. She never watches anything without them, and she also says they have never had any conversations about death. So fast forward again to the next day. They were all hitting golf balls again, and Mrs. A decides that she's going to go into the woods and try to find them herself because they're running low. So she decides she's going to leave her daughter back with her father, the brother, and the girlfriend's boyfriend because she was very upset and scared in the woods the day before. But as soon as she saw her mama walking towards the woods, she would not stay behind. She had it no other way than to be with her mom, even if it meant going back into those woods. So she picks her daughter up and they start walking around searching for those golf balls. So a few minutes later, they are walking behind some rhododendrons, and her daughter looks at her and says, Mama, I've been here before. And she says to her daughter, yes, you have been here before, and you were here yesterday. And then her daughter replies, no, a long time ago. And so Mrs. A kind of laughs it off a little and tries to change the subject. And her daughter responds again with, no, I've been here before. And so she replies, who were you here with before then? Okay, brace yourselves. And then her daughter replies, very matter-of-factly, as she throws her hands in the air, I was here with my old mama and daddy. I kicked them so hard, my shoes fell off, but they killed me anyway. Oh my freaking goodness. So she doesn't really know how to respond to that. So she just hugs her daughter tight. And she reassures her as long as they're around, they would not let anything hurt her and that they love her. She also says that her daughter has never mentioned this again since. Oh my gosh, I just want to hug this little baby girl. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I know that Mrs. A will be in there reading them. Also, are we thinking just the wild imagination of a little girl or past life memories? I'd like to think the latter, although very tragic indeed. And if you have a similar story of your own, I gotta hear it. And if you're new here, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
If one day you saw somebody talking alone, well, let me tell you that instead of judging him and calling him crazy, you might want to reconsider, because maybe he's talking to someone that you don't see. It all started when this man right here, who works as a mechanic, was seen talking alone. And when I say alone, I don't mean talking to himself, because we all do that. No, I mean that he was talking with gestures and everything, like he was explaining something to someone. It's important to know that he was talking out loud for minutes, and sometimes he even stops to listen. This whole thing felt like a discussion, but the only problem is, as you can see, nobody is there. Kept talking like this for minutes until another guy who was checking the cameras saw him, and he was like, bro, what the hell is wrong with him? Is he talking alone? Bro, nah, he's crazy. You know what, let me call him. Ayo, bro, why the hell, who are you talking to? This is where the mechanic responded by saying, don't worry man, I'm just talking with Carlos, you know, he's with me right now. The guy behind the cameras was shocked after hearing that, not only because what Carlos is he talking about, he's clearly alone, but because he knew Carlos. Carlos was a regular client that used to come to this garage to get his car fixed. They both knew Carlos, especially the mechanic. They were friends, okay? So Carlos is a guy that used to come here. What's the issue here? Well, there's this little detail that will make the story scary and creepy. Carlos got unalived a day before this happened. Yes, Carlos is no longer with us. Him and his family got tragically, unalived in a car accident. So this is the exact reason why the guy behind the cameras panicked and decided to yell, bro, what the hell are you talking about? Carlos got unalived yesterday, and you know that. Who are you? You're talking alone, man. But you see, the mechanic kept insisting. He was like, no, what are you talking? I'm literally with Carlos right now. We're having a discussion. What? We're talking to absolutely no one. Carlos is in heaven, man. Get your ass here to see the footage. The mechanic went to see the footage. Well, he was also so shocked because he promised that Carlos was in front of him, but now he can't see him on the cameras. This is where he tried to explain the situation by saying, okay, you know what, bro, maybe you're right. I was just tired. I started being paranoid and I started seeing stuff. You know, it happens. Sometimes it happens. I will just go to rest now, but don't worry, everything's over. Nope, that man is capping. The story is not over. Around 2 weeks later, something weird happened again to the mechanic while he was working in his workshop. You see, at first, the camera started acting weird, which is, you know, maybe you can call that a bug. It happens all the time with electronics. But what happened here, especially here, left everyone speechless.
Estoy revisando por la cámara del taller, de mi teléfono, estoy en mi casa. Y este maestro está hablando solo. No me estoy quedando. La verdad que no me estoy quedando. No, está hablando solo. Voy a preguntar por cámara qué está haciendo. A ver, vamos a preguntar. ¿Tienes que conseguir el teléfono con la Connie, por favor? Es que no me da, está hablando solo, mira, Connie. No sé si estoy loco, ¿qué? Mira. ¿Pero con quién habla, weón? ¿Aló? Oye, disculpa, ¿pero con quién estás hablando?
Con Don Carlos, que me está pasando el presupuesto y explicando el tema de la gente que tuvo anoche en la carretera. Eso me está viendo el presupuesto de este
Oye.
lo que me estoy diciendo.
Oye, cálmate. ¿Qué, Don Carlos? Pero, oye, escúchame un poquito. ¿Tú me estás hablando del accidente de anoche?
Claro.
Juan, me estáis huellando, ¿cierto?
Luego, si te pongo un Carlos aquí, pues. Me estoy explicando el
Oye, ¿podéis subir? ¿Sabes qué? Oye, es que no estás hablando con nadie, viejo.
Se me hace que no está aquí en la frente mío,
No estás hablando con nadie, Juan, y ayer los que chocaron murieron todos. Juan, no estás con nadie, sube y ven a ver las cámaras, tengo todo grabado.
If you're like, bro, what happened here was a simple coincidence, this thing fell by itself, it's called gravity, well, I don't know how to respond to that, because according to me, if you're really focused on the footage, you can see that this thing was being pulled before it fell. So, I don't know, maybe I'm the one becoming crazy here, I guess we'll never know.
The man who licks.
Vile.
Whenever I go to sleep at night, I close my eyes and I make sure that I don't open them again. If I do, I won't be alone. Every night, before I go to sleep, I feel breath on my face. I know if I open my eyes, I'll see the man who licks. When I wake up in the morning, my face wet and sticky, I tell myself the same thing. It was just a dream. That's what I repeat while I scrub my face raw in the bathroom mirror, trying not to look too closely at the redness around my cheeks, or the faint, almost deliberate streaks that run from my chin to my forehead. I started sleeping with the lights on. It didn't help. The breathing still came, slow, warm, closer than it should be. Closer than anyone should ever be without me hearing them enter the room. Sometimes it tickled. And always, I kept my eyes shut. Because if I knew, if I opened them, I wouldn't just feel him anymore, I'd see him. One night, something changed. I woke up suddenly, heart racing, unsure why. The room was silent, no breath, no warmth. For the first time in weeks, nothing. Relief flooded through me. I almost laughed. See, I whispered into the darkness, you're losing it. Slowly, cautiously, I opened my eyes. The room looked exactly the same. My dresser, the door, the faint glow from the hallway light spilling under it. Nothing. That's when I heard it. A wet sound. Not from beside me, from below me. My body froze. The sound came again. Slow, dragging, lick. I looked down. The edge of my bed dipped slightly as if something had just shifted its weight, and then from the darkness beneath the bed, a long, pale tongue slid out across the floorboards. It glistened, it twitched, and then it slowly began to retract. A voice followed it, low, hoarse, right under me. You weren't supposed to look. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The mattress sank further. Something was climbing up. Warm breath returned, this time at the side of my face, right next to my ear. You taste better now you're scared. I tried to scream, but something wet and heavy dragged across my cheek, up, slowly, and this time I couldn't close my eyes.
In Oklahoma, there have been more drownings that are unexplained, people disappearing on the water, on lakes in this area, than any other place in the world. Now, a lot of people attribute this to what they believe is some sort of giant aquatic creature that lives in 3 lakes in Oklahoma. Now, I've studied this extensively, and I believe, without a doubt, there is something residing in Lake Thunderbird. Now, this story comes from actually Lake Thunderbird. There was this fisherman who said one night he went out on his bass boat, and he was out in the middle of the lake. He had cast several lines out, and he said he was just sitting there in his boat. He said, it was just a calm, clear night. The moon was out. There wasn't another boat in sight. And he said he just got this like eerie feeling. And he noticed just how calm, how still and placid the water was. And he said it was just like very quiet, which was odd. And he said all of a sudden, off in the distance, he hears a loud splashing sound. And then over in the other direction, he hears another loud splashing sound. And then in another direction, he hears this loud splashing sound. And he said as he looked out over the water with the moonlight shining on it, he started to see sort of this wake appear, and something very large was moving in the water towards his boat. And it got within a few meters, and then he said it just submerged it, and the water was calm. And so he said, you know what, I'm out of here, I'm pulling the lines in, and I'm going to leave. So he started reeling his lines in, and he said the next thing he remembers, like, he felt this sharp pain up the back of his leg all the way to his back. And he finds himself flying out of the boat into the water and going under. And he said the water was just murky, dark. He couldn't see anything. Something had a hold of him and was pulling him under. And he said that's when he sees these 2 luminous eyes that are staring at him. And he just started to fight as hard as he could to get out of like whatever this was hold. He said he managed to get free, and he starts swimming towards the light of his boat, gets up in his boat, and he just accelerates towards the shore. He gets to the dock, gets out of the boat, and he goes up to the shore. And that's when he notices he has several lacerations all up his leg and all up his back. And he said right at that moment, he heard a loud splashing sound right by the dock. And he said there was this canoe that was tied off. And he said these like tentacles came out of the water, grabbed onto this canoe, and submerged this thing. And he said it just terrified him, and he ran out of there and has not been back to this place since. This second story takes place in the same area at the RV park. There was a woman who was staying there. She takes her dog one night for a walk along the lake. And she said she just remembered hearing splashing sounds coming from the water. And at first she thought it was just like a fish, but she said, whatever it was really large. As she's walking along the water line, she said she just kept hearing the splashing, like whatever this was following her. Then it got quiet for a little bit, and she said, well, it must be gone, whatever it was. She said the next thing she knows, her dog just starts barking and alerting her to something. She looks up ahead, and she said she sees this thing that was as large as a cow, and it's dragging itself along the shore. And she said her dog managed to slip the leash and takes off running towards this thing. She hears her dog yelp. This thing grabbed her dog and just starts dragging it into the water. And she said, it just threw her off guard and like terrified her. And she couldn't believe that there was something in the water that could take a 90-pound dog and just drag it into the water like it was nothing. This third story comes once again in the same general area. There was a man went out fishing one night on the shore, and he said, he cast his line out, and the next thing he knows, he said he's seen this just bright light in the sky. And he said he noticed it just kept getting brighter and brighter. And that's when he could see that this was some sort of like ball of light. And he said it just hovered over the lake, and it was kind of moving back and forth. And then he said it dropped down and it went into the water, and he watched this thing submerge. And he said he could see like the glow of it as it went under the water, and then it just disappeared. So the next thing he knows, they're splashing right where his line is cast out. And he said he just dropped his pole and he ran off. And he said that like shook him up pretty bad. And he thinks that whatever was in that lake was associated to whatever that light was that he's seen in the sky. There was this truck driver who was driving the original Route 66 in New Mexico. And he's driving down the highway one night. And as he's driving, he's listening to his favorite radio station. It's a nice, clear night. And he has his window cracked. And he said all of a sudden, as he's driving, he gets a call from another trucker. And the trucker's like, I need your help. This is an emergency. Can you come to me immediately? I'm not too far from you. And so he gives his location to this truck driver. So the truck driver goes off the highway, follows these back roads and follows the instructions, and it takes him to a cemetery. And when the truck driver gets there, he sees there is no truck there. So he gets back on the CB radio and he starts calling to this trucker, and there's no response. So he says on the radio, look, if this is an emergency, I'm here. This is your last chance. I'm leaving. I'm running late on this load. I gotta go. No response. So he, gets back on the highway again. As he's driving down this highway, right, he sees a man on the side of the road. And all of a sudden, this man just darts out in front of him, and he slams on his brakes. He hits this guy. And when he finally stops, he's like, oh man, I just hit this guy. This is crazy. He gets out of his truck and he's like, are you all right? Are you all right? And, he's expecting to find this guy badly hurt or, worse on the ground. But here is this dude standing behind his truck. And he just has this blank look on his face, and he's looking off in the opposite direction. And so the trucker runs up to him. Hey man, are you okay? I didn't mean to hit you. How let me take you to a doctor. And the guy doesn't say anything. And he said, what can I do for you? Where do you want me to take you? And this guy just points in a direction of the highway, and he says, okay, hop in my truck. I'll drive you there. You tell me where to go. So this guy gets in the truck with him. And as this guy, as this trucker is driving, he's got the guy to the right of him. He starts asking him questions, where are you from? Who are you? Guy doesn't say anything, And he says, are you all right? You have to have some kind of injury. Still, the guy wouldn't say anything. So he figures maybe the guy's just really mad that he got hit by the semi. And so he's like, you know what, I'll just be quiet. And when he tells me to stop off somewhere, I'll drop him off. As he's driving, this man, right, that's in the truck, he starts humming. And the trucker kind of looks over at him, because this is the first time he's heard anything out of him. And the guy starts humming a little louder and a little louder, and it's getting louder and louder. And he said as this man was humming, he looked over and he could see his face just start to change. And the color in his eyes started to change. And he said all of a sudden this man just turns and jumps on him and starts grabbing him. And he's fighting with this guy, trying to get him off. And this guy is just pushing as hard as he can and squeezing his arms. And finally, he slams on the brakes, and this guy goes flying forward and hits, the dash of the truck. The guy gets up, opens the truck door, and just takes off outside the vehicle. So as this guy, the trucker, right, is trying to make sense of what just happened, he, jumps out of the truck, and it was like, hey man, what's going on? And he's trying to chase after this guy. But he said all of a sudden, the guy just disappeared into the desert. And he sees this coyote just run across the desert. And the trucker said he don't know why, that coyote just freaked him out. So he ran and jumped in his truck. He took off and sped out of there. When he gets to a truck stop, he's like, man, I need to get a cup of coffee. So he gets out of his truck and, he goes into this truck stop. But, right as he comes through the front door, there are all these posters of missing people. And one poster in particular sticks out to him because he realizes that's the guy he gave a ride to. And it said he was a truck driver and he went missing on that stretch of highway. The scary thing about skinwalkers is that they could be your family, your friends, anyone around you. Now, this is a story I heard from a guy named Jesse. Jesse had just moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and he was pursuing this musical career. He said he got an apartment in downtown, and things were actually going pretty well for him. And he actually got a gig as a guitar player in a pretty large band in the area. So he said, he had just started dating this new girlfriend, and he was enjoying living in the big city, when all of a sudden he gets a phone call from his father. Now, his father, he hadn't heard from in 10 years. He had went off on a bender, and he had no idea where he went. So it was, kind of weird to hear from his father. His father tells him, going to come to Tennessee and stay with you for a little bit, if that's all right. Like, I need to get back on my feet. Is that okay? He was reluctant, but was like, okay, yeah, let's get you better and let's bring you here to Tennessee. So his father comes out and moves in with him. After about a week of living in this apartment, he decides to introduce his girlfriend to his father. The girlfriend, she comes over one night, and when she comes through the front door, she sees his father. Now, he said his father, used to wear all of this Native American jewelry and like a talisman that he believed protected him from anything negative. Well, he said immediately as his girlfriend walked in the door, she got really fidgety and nervous, and she acted like she didn't want to be there or talk to his father. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, she's like, I have to leave, I have to go, and she just walks out the door. So Jesse's kind of like, well, what's going on with her? Like, what's up? And he said, for the next couple weeks, right, she didn't want to come over to the house. She didn't want to see his father. She was acting really strange. So he said, a few more months passed and things were going really good with his father. But then he started noticing that his father would go out late at night. He would be gone for the rest of the night. And in the morning, he would find his father in the living room, completely naked. And he started to suspect that maybe his father was back on something. So, he's stressed out about this, and he's stressed out about his girlfriend acting strange. And he said, it was just really, really hard times. Well, he said one night he gets done with the gig and he actually was walking home. Now, at the time, Nashville had a pretty significant snowstorm and there was no one out in the downtown area. And he said he just remembered walking down the streets and it was eerily quiet. There was no one out. And he said that's when he seen in the alleyway next to a restaurant, there was a man standing there. And he said just something seemed off about this person and he felt like something was about to go down. So he started to run. And he said as he took off running, this man started to chase him. And he said all of a sudden this man went from being a man to some sort of half man, half dog like creature. And he said it was just some ferocious type of creature. And this thing is running after him down the streets of Nashville. And he said he trips in the snow, he falls to the ground, and this thing comes over on top of him and starts smelling him. And he said all of a sudden it turned its head. And he said as he had him, kind of pinned down on the ground, he looked over and he noticed, there was a tattoo on this thing. And it was the exact same tattoo that his dad had on his wrist. And he said this thing just turned and it got up and it took off running down into an alley. And he said at this point, he suspected that whatever this thing was, most likely was his father, and he was now terrified. So he goes back to his apartment. He calls up his girlfriend and he's like, hey, I'm freaking out. Like, this is what just happened with my father. I know you don't believe me, but, something is wrong. His girlfriend comes over and she starts talking to him. And she's like, the reason I've been acting weird is because before you introduced me to your father, I was walking down the street and I seen your father eat a dog. And I didn't know how to tell you that. And I didn't know what you would think or if you would believe me. And so I knew something was off about him. And once he heard this, he was for certain that his dad was whatever this creature was. So him and his girlfriend, they locked themselves in the bedroom. And about 1 a.m., he said all of a sudden he hears the front door open of his apartment and he can hear footsteps coming down the hallway. And then bam, 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 bam. He hears this banging sound on the door. And he hears his father screaming, yelling at him to come out, to get out of the bedroom right now. And he's like, no, I'm not coming out. And he's like, you don't understand. She's a skinwalker. You need to get out of there now. And he said that's when he turned and he looked behind him and he seen his girlfriend was no longer his girlfriend, but the same creature that he had seen on the streets. And so he ran out the door and he said his father did some kind of ceremony, and whatever this was took off out of the apartment and he never seen it again.
I stopped at a bar on a road trip, and I don't think that the bartender was a normal human. I was driving in the middle of nowhere, and it was the kind of road where you don't see a car for miles. It was getting late, and I was getting a little bit tired, so I decided to stop at this bar on the way, just to kind of wake myself up, maybe grab a glass of water. The place looked old, not run down exactly, but just like it hasn't been upgraded in a couple of decades. There were 3, maybe 4 people all sitting at tables, and there wasn't a TV on, there wasn't any music, it was just a humming coming from behind the bar. I was just about to walk out because I felt weird being there, and then the bartender looked at me and he said, go ahead and sit wherever you like. So I sat at the bar, and I sat close, maybe a little too close to the bartender, because I started to notice that something was a little bit off with him. He would not blink very often, and when he did, it was very slow, like too slow. He asked what I wanted, and I just said I would like some water, and he looked at me and he said, "We don't get very many people passing through this late." I told him I was just driving through, and he nodded like he already kind of knew that. While he was getting my water, I kind of glanced around and I noticed that the other people weren't talking to each other. They weren't talking to each other, they weren't talking to the bartender, but they weren't looking at their phones either. They were just facing forward. Anyways, he handed me my glass of water, and I noticed that there was no ice, there's no condensation. It was just water super still in the cup. I still drank it, it was normal. And then he looked at me and he said, "You're welcome to stay as long as you would like." Something about that, or the way that he said it, made me feel a little uncomfortable. I asked him what time they closed, and he said, "We don't really keep track of that out here." That's when I decided I should probably go, so I pulled out my card to pay, and he just shook his head. He said, "No, you made it in. You're good." Whatever that meant. So I left, and as soon as I stepped outside, the air felt normal again. Like, it felt like I almost came or walked into a different dimension when I walked back outside. I got into my car, there was no signal, I wasn't surprised, but I did notice the time, it caught my eye, and it was 2 hours that I was in that bar, which didn't make sense because it could have been more than 20 minutes. I started driving again, and I needed gas, so I went and I stopped at a gas station about 10 minutes down the road, and I walked in and I grabbed a couple of snacks and I said, "Hey, do you have any bars nearby?" just to see what he would say, and he said, "There's not any bars nearby for at least 30 miles. And I was like, "I just barely came from one." He shook his head and he said, "You probably stopped at an old building off route." And then he stopped himself. I asked what he meant, and he said, "That place hasn't been open in years." I didn't go back to check, but I will say this. When I woke up the next morning, I convinced myself that it was just a weird stop and I was really tired. Maybe I lost track of time. It happens, right? A couple days later, I checked my bank statement. There was nothing from the bar, which, yeah, I didn't get charged. But there also wasn't anything from the gas station that I stopped at either. And I know I stopped there and I bought something and I paid and I watched the receipt print out. So I checked my dash cam, and I don't usually do that, but it was really bothering me. And it showed me pulling over, but it wasn't where I remembered. It showed me pulling over at an empty stretch of a road. There was no building, no lights, nothing. It showed that I literally pulled over, my lights were on, my car was on for 2 hours. That just doesn't make sense to me. I don't remember that part. I don't remember just sitting there for 2 hours, not moving at all. I know I went into a bar and I went to a gas station.
Right. So now we are up to 11 scientists involved in groundbreaking research going missing or dying under mysterious circumstances in the last 2 years, but there's nothing to see there. There's no connection, even though several of them were working at the same facility. And all of them were working on things that would have made life easier on our planet. There's no connection. Right. Okay, got it. And then a man claims that he is kidnapped by a dolphin for 3 days. The government says, "No way, that's a hoax. That's so silly. That did not happen." However, we are going to have government helicopters and vehicles at that beach after the incident, just in case. And then, come to find out, 36 dolphins went missing in 2005 after being trained by the Navy and were never found. But I'm sure there's no relation. Right. Okay, got it. And there's definitely nothing weird about nobody in the Epstein files being arrested yet. Nothing weird about that at all. Raping children? Murdering children? That's not weird. Of course not. It's the United States. Why would we think otherwise? Oh, and now they're working on creating completely artificial meat for the United States to eat, because they're definitely not poisoning us with the food and water and other things that we are consuming in this country. Right. Okay, got it. At what point does it stop being a conspiracy theory and just start being fact? Because I feel like we're getting there. Why are they killing these scientists? I mean, I know why, but also, like, they're making it so fucking obvious at this point. We all know that you're fucking doing it, but then the government probably realizes that nobody is going to do jack shit about it. So, here we are. Crazy times. Remember to drink water and take your birth control. Okay, love you.
Hello, good morning. Please excuse me if I still have eye boogers. I literally just woke up. But y'all remember that story that I told you about my cousin who didn't know he was dead, but I had to tell him he was dead? Okay, listen, his name is Calvin. He came to me in a dream last night and he was like, "You got to tell people about how we was sleepwalking, and went on a picnic." I told y'all, me and Calvin, we wasn't connected at the hip, we was connected at the soul. Something that is normal for me and Calvin is when we go to sleep, we astral project. If you don't know the difference between lucid dreaming and astral projecting, I'm going to tell you the difference. Lucid dreaming is when you know you're asleep and you're able to shape and form your own world. Astral projection is when you know that you are asleep and you're able to project your subconscious into someone else's subconscious and they actually know that you're there. Me and Calvin had our own sleep state world. Now, in our dream state, because my mama is who my mama is, and she figured out that we was going to see each other through astral projections, whenever she put me on punishment, she actually put up warding so that we're not able to come directly into each other's world. Y'all, what's that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? And he was like running through memories and time and stuff like that. Inception, Insidious. I don't remember. But that's how our worlds was bending together. Like, it would come close, but it don't mesh. And that was because of my damn mama. She literally figured out why we was okay with being on punishment. Have you ever known kids who was like, you putting us on punishment? Okay. Because we not really on punishment. Either me and him in our own world, or I put a doppelganger in my room and I made my mama and them think that I was really up in here, but I really went through this portal in my closet and I went to go party with Lily and them. Like, what the fuck? The hell is a punishment for a star child? Girl, let me move around. But no, my mom put a stop to that. Once she found out, she's like, oh, that's what y'all doing? Oh, okay. You wish you could see him. You gonna be able to see him through your window and that's it. But anyway, this one particular time, I got in trouble for something that I didn't even fucking do. I was mad as hell. I'm hurt, okay? I'm for real hurt. Calvin didn't like that. Calvin didn't like that. He was like, you know what? I'm finna figure out a way to get you up out of there. Well, I don't like the fact that you locked up for something that somebody else did. And I was like, however you get me out of here, get me out of here. So he's sitting there and I'm like, I'm hungry. And he was like, oh, we should go on a picnic. And I'm like, okay. So he pack up in his dream. He pack up sandwiches and all kind of stuff. I'm still sitting in my room, literally sitting, looking out the window, pathetic as fuck, right? And then I hear Calvin calling my name. I look out my window, I look down. He's down on the ground. I'm like, how the fuck? He was like, jump out the window. Jump out the window. It's gonna be okay, I promise. Just jump out the window. Okay, I did. And when I hit the ground was actually a rubber mat. He put his hand up and you could see a shimmering iridescent wall in between us. And I was like, what the fuck? And he was like, just come on, just come on. Now we walking down the line of this wall, okay? I don't know how it happened, but the way that the wall was angled, it led us out to a park. Calvin set out a whole little picnic spread. We sitting there, we eating, we happy, we married. Then the next thing I know, I hear police sirens. And I'm confused because why we hearing sirens in the astral world? Like, that's not normal. I look at him, he look at me, he like, what the fuck is happening? Okay, yeah, so this is not normal. I'm not tripping. Why we hearing sirens? Our astral world get the rumbling like it's a whole earthquake going off. Now this 100% is not normal because we don't go through catastrophic or traumatizing things in our world. What the fuck happened? And now I'm looking at him because what the fuck did you do? If I would never followed you out this room, then none of this would, what is happening? Homeboy, he over here shook. Calvin don't know what the fuck to do. He like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the fuck is happening. This ain't never happened before. Next thing I know, I'm blinded by a white light. I'm talking about a white searing light out of nowhere. I don't know where it came from. I'm trying to blink. Blinking so hard, my eyes get to watering because where the fuck did this light just come from? In between blinks, it's like blink, astro world, blink, police officer, blink, astro world, blink, police officer. What the fuck? What is happening? I look over, Calvin just disintegrate. I'm talking about black dust. Poof, gone. Get to feeling little tinglies in my feet. You know how when your legs go to sleep and now your toes got the fuzzy antenna feeling in them? Yeah, that's what we at. I look down, my feet is low-key starting to disappear. I'm freaking the fuck out because I don't know what the fuck is happening. Now I feel a tug on my third eye. That's letting me know that something is trying to wake me up. Maybe I'll wake up to 10 cops, 10 of them, all surrounding us. There is a school called Ruggles Elementary in Chicago on the south side. It was on 79th and what? Wabash? No. Calumet. It was on 79th and Calumet. Somehow, some way, me and this man walked, sleepwalking. Yeah, sleepwalking out of our house. Mine's is on 75th in Michigan. He on 76th in Michigan. We walked out of our houses, down the street, to Ruggles School, in the middle of the playground, and had a whole fucking picnic. This man literally packed a whole fucking picnic basket. I'm talking about juices, chips, sandwiches, picnic basket, picnic blanket, and we just out there at 2 o'clock in the fucking morning having a fucking picnic while we half damn sleep. I was known with the police because my daddy was a help desk technician and because my mother was a volunteer for the DARE program. And of course, the police officers that found us knew my daddy and my mama. Could you imagine the trouble that we got into when the police come knocking on your family door at 2:45 in the morning to deliver their daughter back to them because they found her asleep in a park having a picnic with a boy? My mama started rolling up her sleeves. She said, I want you to know as soon as that door closed, it's me and you. My daddy said, no, wait till the police pull off the block. Calvin, mama and daddy tore his ass off just as bad as mine did. They mad than a motherfucker. Y'all could have got killed. You're walking, sleepwalking through traffic. Y'all done went 7 fucking blocks and you're sitting in a damn park at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're on 79th Street. You could have died. I mean, they ain't wrong. We could have died. So, I mean, like, we took the beating because we could have died. Just know that when we went to sleep that night, and we seen each other in that astro world, baby, baby. Fuck astro projections. Now I'm lucid dreaming because I'm finna drop bombs on your mark ass. Boy, I just got my ass towed off because of you. And he gonna have the nerve to sit up here and say so. Well, you got your own free will. You didn't have to follow me. I won't do it again. I won't do it again, Bucka.
We are back with another Trini Paranormal, Trini Scary Story, Trini Folklore for you today. And what would you do if you heard chains dragging in the night and you were locked outside? Our follower had a very terrifying experience with seems to be a lagahoop. So before I get into the story, I eliminated some parts of it because it does talk about ABUSE. So our follower said, this happened in La Huacata. I was around 14 years old and my sister and I used to be ABUSE by our stepdad at the time. Long story short, one day I finally walked and snapped at him. I was cursing at him and telling him to get out. He got mad and told my mom I have to leave, so they put me out that night. I had nowhere to go, so I stayed in the gallery or the porch while everyone was asleep. Just laying there, this could have been around 1 in the morning, I heard the neighbor gate open and close. So I looked to see who was there, but there was no one there. I lay back down and I heard another neighbor's gate open and close, but there was no one outside. This started to give me the chills. But what frightened me was that, but what frightened me the most is that when our gate opened and closed, I just heard like chains dragging in the gravel in the road. But the dragging was moving down the street while all the gates started to open and close. I started to bang down the door and scream when my mother came in and said that she had left the door unlocked. This was my true story. So it seems as though there was an entity dragging a chain, and it's almost as if she was spared because it was the gates of all the neighbors were opening and closing. She was hearing the chain dragging. She heard her gate open and close, but the chain was dragging, continuing on the road. I think personally she was spared. She was going through a lot. What do you guys think it was? And do you think that she was spared from seeing the lag?
130 million people take road trips every year. 15,400 of them are never seen again. You guys, we have a new supernatural folk horror, body horror, paranormal, monster, supernatural, all the things, all of the best things. The setting is in the deep freaking woods. The catchphrase is don't drive at night. So I'm talking about the movie Passenger. It's coming out on May 22nd, and it is about a couple who witnessed a gruesome highway accident. And then they soon realize they did not leave the crash scene alone. A demonic presence called the Passenger won't stop until it claims them both. This looks so freaking scary. So if you have any summer road trips planned where you might be traveling through the deep dark woods at night, possibly think again.
Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
Do you know how many people started believing in spirits after that body cam footage was released? A couple months ago, I posted this video where I talked about the commercials that played in the background as Chris Watts was being questioned by police. I talked about how I believe that Shanann was sort of speaking from beyond, if you will. Well, if that still didn't convince you, then take a look at the body cam footage that was taken during the search of the Watts family home. When the scent dog is in the home searching for evidence after Shanann and the girl's disappearance, the police officer and dog handler are both spooked by the sound of giggling. As they enter the closet, they're asking each other, like, you heard that, right? And the police officer notes that it kind of sounds like a children's toy. So the dog handler asks her to go into the closet and step on something to see if that's what made the noise, but they can't seem to figure it out.
Oh my gosh. What in the world is that? Wow. Go in there and step on that little blue thing and see if that's where that noise came.
Yeah, it sounded like a kid toy.
It sort of sounded like it.
Something. I heard it.
Did you hear it?
I did.
Sounded like a kid giggling or something, didn't it? Or a kid.
It did.
Where did that come from? Because all he did was go straight in there. That was strange. Well, we'll make a note of that.
I heard it.
Toy or not, this definitely seems to have shaken them up. As they move on throughout the house, viewers in the comments of the video that was uploaded to YouTube were quick to point out whispers that can be heard. In this clip, you can very clearly hear the whispering voice say what sounds like, "I'm with Cece." And Cece was the nickname for Shanann's daughter, Celeste. Then, as they enter the master bedroom, you can hear the voice say, "This is our home." So I'd love to know, what do you guys think of this? Is the Watts family home actually haunted, or can this be explained some other way?
All three of us were there, and we all saw the same person standing inside an empty house. I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you'd like to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. I don't scare easily. I grew up in a house where weird things would happen all the time. Footsteps in empty hallways, cabinet doors opening left and right, things disappearing and reappearing in places we'd already checked 10 times over. Happened so often that it was just completely normal. The house itself was over 100 years old, sitting in a really rural area. It was on the site of an old military research facility. So even if something did feel weird, there's always a reason to just brush it off. But when I was 12 years old, things got really bad. Everything happened over the span of about a month, right in the middle of when I felt like my life was already kind of falling apart. My parents were going through a messy divorce. My dad was about to move out. The house was under renovation, and I was getting ready to switch schools. It was just a lot. A lot of fighting, a lot of tension, a lot of unknown, and then things started happening that to this day, I can't explain. The first thing didn't even really happen to me. It happened to my little brother. I woke up at around 1 a.m. to my little brother screaming, and I knew something was wrong instantly because it wasn't just crying. He sounded very scared. His room was right across from mine. And when I ran in, he was sitting upright in bed, hysterical, pointing down the hallway. He could barely get his words out, but he kept repeating the same thing over and over. There was a man. He saw someone standing in the hallway, tall and broad, but he was so dark that he couldn't make out any features, just the shape of him. And I was young, so I remember standing there, too scared to even check down the hallway myself. I felt myself wanting to tell him that it must have been just a nightmare, but because I couldn't bring myself to turn around and prove it, Just didn't say anything. Before I could try something else, my parents rushed in and sent me back to my bed. Neither of us slept at all that night, but I remember repeating to myself, he's 7. It was just a nightmare. But a week later, I wasn't so sure anymore. It was just me and my mom in the house that day. My dad had taken my brother out of town, and for the first time in a while, the house felt calm. I was in my room reading. Early evening, must have been around 7. And the light in the hallway between our rooms was on. I remember that detail very clearly, because it mattered. I heard my mom's door open, and then I heard her walking down the hallway, and I could instantly tell that she was upset because the steps were heavy. She walked straight into my room and started accusing me of listening at her door. She was angry, genuinely angry, and I was confused because I hadn't left my bed. And I kept telling her that, but she wouldn't believe me. She said she knew I had been standing right outside her door listening, and after accusing me several more times, she eventually went back to her room. But a few moments later, it happened again. Her same angry footsteps, her same accusations, but I noted that this time she didn't seem as angry. She seemed unsettled, like she knew that something wasn't adding up, but she didn't have an answer as to why. It happened a third time, and by then I could see it clearly on her face. She wasn't mad anymore. She was scared, and I was tired of her accusing me of doing something that I wasn't doing, so I went to bed. Sometime later, though, she came back in. She woke me up. Instead of yelling, and instead of her being mad, she made me promise that I had been in bed the whole time. I easily swore to her that I had, and without saying anything else, she picked me up and carried me into her room. We slept there together with the TV on. She didn't explain anything to me that night, but the next morning I asked her, and this time she told me everything. She said that because the hallway light had been on, she thought that I was eavesdropping, because she could see a shadow from underneath her door, the outline of feet, standing right up against it, close enough that it completely blocked the light, like someone was pressed against her door, listening. She said that she could hear it shifting its weight, the floorboards creaking under it, and after the second time she came in, she realized that whatever was standing there was too heavy to be me. A few weeks later, my dad moved out. One afternoon, we were walking back from picking berries, me, my dad, and my brother. It was the middle of the day, and it was beautiful, bright and clear, not a cloud in the sky. And we happened to be passing by my mom's house, and we all looked up at it instinctively, and we saw someone standing in her window, standing still, not moving, watching us. We all waved, assuming that it was her. We smiled. We waited for her to wave back, but she didn't move. She didn't turn or walk away. She just stood there. After a while, we just gave up and kept walking. I remember feeling kind of hurt, like she was ignoring us or something. But when we got home a few days later, I mentioned it to her. She looked at me like I was insane. She told me that she hadn't even been home. She had left town that weekend, and the house had been completely empty. No one was there, no visitors, no one with a key, no one. I asked my dad, and I asked my brother. All three of us confirmed that we saw the same thing. Someone had been standing in that window in a house where no one was supposed to be inside. After that, everything stopped. We didn't hear any more footsteps. We didn't hear any more creaky floorboards. No more voices, no more people in windows, nothing. But not long after, things in our lives really started to fall apart. We experienced illness and loss, things that none of us were prepared for. And I can't help but feeling like if the energy in the house knew what was coming, it was almost as if it was trying to warn us.
I walked in and said, "Hi Molly, I'm the detective on your case. How are you doing today?" She immediately jumped to, "How is Agatha? Is she alright?" So I said, "We'll get back to that, Molly. I need you to explain to me exactly what happened last night." And she said, "No, like, I need to know, please." So I said, "She's still in surgery, Molly. That's all I know. And it's really important that you tell me exactly what happened." And finally she was like, yeah, no, we were pretty wasted, so I don't remember a lot. I asked, "Do you remember anything before waking up?" And she said, "Nothing that seems important. I just remember waking up." Okay, let's start there. You know, what exactly do you remember? And she said, "It was pitch black, my head was spinning, and it took me a while to get my bearings." okay, and then what? She said that she had to pee something fierce, so she rolled over to get out of bed, and she felt something, and it freaked her out, so she pulled back into bed. Where was it? She said it had to be between the bed and the floor somewhere, but like, it was just a slight tingle when there wasn't supposed to be one there, so it just freaked her out. Okay, so then what did you do? She said, I got over it, I guess, tried the other side of the bed, and she said that she reached the floor this time before feeling it. And then this time it had been like 2 or 3, and then she heard it. What did you hear? She said, I have no idea, but it was horrifying. It sounded like it was something out of a horror movie, all like guttural and scratchy. You can only imagine. So then what? She said, well, with the things on the floor and the sound, I kind of lost it, I think, and ran to the door. Well, tried to anyways. Did you reach it? And she said, no, not at first. Got tangled up in them, and the noises were getting worse and so much worse, and then she started freaking out a little bit. So I reassured her, it's okay, Molly, take your time. And she just screamed, I didn't know, I swear, there was just no way. And I told her, no one blames you, Molly, you couldn't have known. She continued, it hurt, you know? The more I tried to move, the more I got tangled up in them. And the screams, oh God, the screams got so bad. And I couldn't take it, you know? So I just pulled at everything I could to try to get myself free until I was able to get to the door. I asked her, did you leave? And she said, no, I needed to know. So I turned on the light. And I'm kind of like, jeez, you saw her? And she said, yeah, I saw the fishing lines crisscrossed all over the room and the fishing hooks on the ends of them. One stuck in each of Agatha's eyes, all open, and more stuck in her nose, her ears, her neck, her chin, her arms, her legs, her fingers, her toes. She said, I did that, detective. I tore her to pieces every time I moved.
This case is very, very, very heavy and sad from the very beginning until literally the very end. So just be aware of that, but I need to know your thoughts on this. Eileen Carol Pittman was born in 1956 in Rochester in Michigan. And to say her childhood was troubling wouldn't even begin to cover it. I would describe it more to be traumatizing to the biggest degree. Her mother, Eileen Wuornos, was only 14 years old when she married Eileen's father, 18-year-old Leo Pittman. But after less than 2 years of marriage, Diane filed for divorce. She was 16 years old when she gave birth to Eileen 2 months later. Eileen never met her father. In 1967, Leo Pittman was sentenced to life imprisonment for committing the worst of the worst crimes. His victim was a 7-year-old girl. And when Eileen was almost 4 years old, her mother walked out on her and left her to be with her grandparents. Her grandparents adopted not only Eileen, but also her older brother. However, they kept their real identities from the kids a secret at first, only referring to themselves to be their adoptive parents and not telling them that they were in fact their biological real grandparents. And Eileen's mom walking out on them was probably for the best. She was pretty incapable of caring about anything or anyone other than herself, and not once in her life did she love or care for her children in any capacity, let alone in the way that a mother should. But unfortunately, the new situation the kids found themselves in wasn't any better. The grandparents were awful. They had so many issues of their own, and they would take out all of their anger and struggles out on the kids, psychologically, physically, and when Eileen fell pregnant at only 14 years old, not by choice, she believed that the father could have either been her brother or her grandfather. She was sent away to a home for unwed mothers, and in March of 1972, she gave birth to a baby boy who was then immediately put up for adoption. Shortly after Eileen returned back home, her grandmother passed away from health complications, and her father insisted on kicking out both Eileen and her brother out of the house. And it wasn't long before Eileen ran away and began life on her own. Life on her own, though, was tough. She was a teenage girl with nowhere to go,
ago, basically living in the woods of Michigan in the dead of winter, surviving only by trying to make enough money by offering her services to men who would pass by driving by on the road. Throughout that period of her life, Eileen was either hitchhiking, meeting way too many terrible strangers, and or committing petty crimes. A childhood friend of Eileen's that would stay in contact with her would later say, quote, "She had the worst life of anyone I have ever met. When I first heard of Eileen's murder charges, it didn't shock me. If you had only been there and seen how terribly she was treated all her life, it only makes sense," unquote. It is really, really sad and unfortunate and terrible. Eileen Wuornos was 18 years old when she was arrested for disorderly conduct amongst other things, and a couple of years later she was arrested again for assault and disturbing the peace after a bartender made her very, very angry and upset. Hitchhiking across America, Eileen eventually made her way to Florida and was presented to this potentially life-changing piece of luck because she met a very wealthy yacht club president, 69-year-old Lewis Fell, who fell in love with her, and the two of them got married in 1976. But by that point in her life, the kind of person that she grew up to be was the kind of person who held a lot of anger in her heart, which makes sense. I mean, can you blame her? However, the way that she would express her anger was pretty unhinged. Not saying that her behavior was right, because it wasn't, but knowing about her past, it shouldn't surprise you that she acted out more oftentimes than not. One night, she made a scene while she was out. She was just acting completely erratically, and she was once again arrested and sent to jail. Her now husband, Lewis Fell, didn't like that because he lived what a lot of people would describe as a high society lifestyle. He had a reputation to keep, and this kind of marriage wasn't one that was going to work out for him. So he had the marriage annulled after only a few months. Following that, Eileen's life unfortunately resumed its steady downfall spiral. Her brother Keith lost his battle to throat cancer the same year as her marriage and divorce, and because of that, Eileen received a $10,000 check from his life insurance. But she very, very quickly spent all of that money on a luxury car that she ended up wrecking shortly after. Throughout the next 10 years or so, her life continued in this way, offering her services to strange men, still hitchhiking with really no real destination, and committing various crimes that ranged from forgery and theft to assault. But then in 1986, something changes. Because while she was out in Daytona Beach, Florida, Eileen met 24-year-old Tyria Moore, and they began a very intense romantic relationship that will last around 4 years. For the first time in her life, Eileen had someone. Tyria, known as Ty, became her other half pretty much. They lived together, they moved together, they survived together. Eileen continued working on the side of the highways. Ty occasionally worked at different motels here and there. It was not a glamorous life, but doing things together and having company for once in her life, it was the closest thing to love Eileen Wuornos had ever known. She would later say, quote, "I miss Ty. I lost Tyria over this, and the people that lost their loved ones and everything, I really think first about the people that lose their loved ones, and then Tyra second." Eileen's first victim was 51-year-old Richard Mallory. Richard was the owner of an electronics repair shop in Clearwater, Florida. He was last seen November 30th of 1989. Eileen and Richard were strangers, but they connected through her line of work, and they made plans to meet up in a remote part of Florida to do whatever it was that they were going to do. I think you know what I'm talking about. And according to Eileen's recollection of events, very shortly after they met up, Richard became very aggressive, very mean, and very forceful very quickly. Eileen had a finding herself in that situation. She pulled it out and she twice in the chest. The following day, she confided in Ty and told her what she did. When Richard's body was discovered the following month, several miles away from his abandoned car, it shocked the town, because of course it would, but he would not be the only victim that would be found in that state. Because after that, Eileen did it again, at least 6 more times, leading to the discovery of 6 middle-aged men, including a construction worker, a rodeo worker, a trucker, and a retired chief of police. Her victims were, like Richard, usually taken to an isolated place multiple times and then robbed. Their bodies were usually found weeks later after being dumped in some area of the woods on the side of the highway, and their vehicles were also often stolen, then abandoned. Eileen and Ty would also often sell objects taken from the victims at local pawn shops. In Eileen's own words, she would later describe the state of her mind during this crime spree, quote, "I really got tired of it all. I was angry about the Johnson," quote. She also stated, quote, "To me, this world is nothing but evil, and my own evil just happened to come out because of the circumstances of what I was doing," end quote. So, of course, the sudden discovery of multiple bodies around the same area in Florida had law enforcement on high alert, and before long, they were able to find a stolen vehicle. They run the plates, it belongs to a victim, they recover fingerprints, and after testing those, because Eileen Wuornos had been in trouble with the law before, meaning that her fingerprints were in the system, they got an exact match. And just like that, in January of 1991, Eileen was arrested. As part of their investigation, police officers tracked down Ty in Pennsylvania because different witnesses had often seen the two of them together, and
and they made her a deal. They told her, if you tell us everything that you know, if you give us everything that you have, we will make sure that no charges are filed against you. So they offered her full immunity in exchange for her cooperation. Ty agreed, and she told them everything that she knew, but that still was not enough, because if they could, authorities wanted a confession from Eileen herself. And their plan to get that was to work with Ty to have her make phone calls to Eileen to get Eileen to confess, and that's exactly what they did. And with authorities listening to every word, Ty called Eileen pretending to be really scared, saying that she was scared that authorities were coming after her. And in one recorded phone call, Eileen, trying to protect the woman that she loved, promised, quote, "I will not let you be involved in the picture. You are not the one. I am the one who did everything," end quote. But on that phone call as well, when it was just the two of them, important to note that Eileen told Ty that everything that she did in self-defense, but that was all that authorities needed. And Eileen was officially charged in connection to 6 separate cases. On January 16th of 1991, she confessed. However, Eileen would only go to trial once for her first victim, Richard Mallory, because she was adamant that she was acting in self-defense, claiming that Richard. The other charges with the other victims either ended in her pleading either no contest or guilty, so those did not go to trial, but not because Eileen agreed that those were not in self-defense. She stuck to her word that every time that she claimed a victim was because that man had either overpowered her or attempted to, explaining that she had met up with all sorts of men for her entire life, and saying that her only motive in these 6 cases for fighting back was because those men were clearly there to make her their victim. Richard did. The other men tried to, but her story was that it was always in self-defense. She just let the others go because she felt that she needed to, quote, get right with God, end quote. In Richard's case, she knew that she had no chance of the jury believing her, but she wanted to try. The trial began January 14th of 1992. Eileen pleaded not guilty. Before the trial, she spoke to reporters outside of the courthouse with desperation in her voice, saying, quote, "I'm never going to get a fair trial, and they're gonna electrocute me, give me life in prison, and I don't deserve it. I don't deserve life. It was just self-defense," end quote. She was right that the jury would not believe her, even though it came out that Richard Mallory had been convicted and given a 10-year sentence for proving that he literally was the kind of man who would do such a thing because he had done it before. Eileen Wuornos was sentenced to 6 death sentences. She spent over 10 years on death row at the Broward Correctional Institute in Florida. During this time, she read, she wrote letters, she gave documentary interviews that revealed a mind that held a lot of anger, grief, heartbreak, and rage. Once, reflecting on who she might have been, she stated, quote, "Now, if I do my life all over again, if I came from a family that was supportive and everything was financially stable, I wouldn't be here," end quote. Her sentence was carried out and she became the 10th woman in the United States to ever be executed. Yeah, I told you guys, so extremely sad from beginning to the very end. Not excusing her behavior, but I do feel like if she had had a different kind of upbringing, she would have been a completely different person, is my opinion. But that is all I have for today. Thank you guys for spending time with me today and for listening to this story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.